Professor Lance Sexton, you have us into week 7. Coleman's 2015 certified SBA 7A loan closing training. By the way, Lance and I were just talking before we came on. We're going to update this for 2016. Everyone online has the option for taking that. We're not going to charge you for that. I want you to know that. So if you see a 2016 update, you want to refresh your skills, you just want a module, shoot an email over to Joseph and we will do that. We won't charge you. Is that okay with you, Lance?
It sounds great. I just think there are a few areas of this important training that we need to tweak and update going into the new year, and would certainly love to see our participants on this one get those updates.
Yeah, and there's new SOPs coming down. There's new SBA 1. There's a lot of stuff that's happening. You're current with what you have in 2015, but 2016 is around the door. You should all know. Question. Let's see. This is. We got one more week left, Lance.
This is week 7. We've got one more week, and they're complete.
I'm in Florida. I'm going to try to do it remotely. If for some reason I'm not able to access. Does Florida have internet? If I can't access it, congratulations. I will do my best to do that. Let's go to the poll questions. What percentage of your SBA loan requests include refinancing? Why are we asking this, Lance?
Well, in this week's section, we did talk about the requirements for using refinancing as a use of proceeds on an SBA loan. It certainly is an important area of SBA lending, and as our poll results show, it looks like a significant amount of the loan requests they're seeing do have a refinancing element. And I think that's one of the big advantages of SBA, Bob, is quite often you can take a debt that the small business currently has and put it on better terms, lower payments. And with the alternative lenders running around floating out 20, 25, 30% money, there are certainly some opportunities to fix that for the small business.
In the 1920, the lender has to affirm that there is sufficient working capital to have this business operate for the next 12 months. I've said that's a trap. It's actually 18 months because that's what the Inspector General looks at. But I agree with you. I think that a prudent loan underwriter will take that into account, will address the refinancing issues. SBA allows it, and it's all about cash flow for the company. And go ahead, Lance.
I'm sorry, I had a request the other day, and when I was looking at the business's financial condition and the various assets and debts that they had, the request was for one thing, but I was able to pinpoint a loan that was on a really short amortization at a higher than market interest rate that I felt like put the entire project at risk. But by pulling it in and refinancing it with the same SBA request, I not only took care of the request that I had, but I solidified the repayment ability
Absolutely.
in the future.
That's a classic SBA use of proceeds. And Lance, you made a very important point about these alternative lenders. Your borrowers know how to get money from these alternative lenders within 24 hours.
I had a small business today that I was talking to that had an inventory issue. They went online. I think it was cabbage. And they got $50,000 and they had it the next day.
Did you calculate the APR?
But it was at a ridiculous interest rate, and it was a seasonal inventory need, and I just explained to them, we really need to look at wrapping that up and putting it on a normal SBA interest rate. In this case, it would be an express loan at 4 1/4 over prime, which was substantially better than what they had.
Cabbage, what was it, 40, 50% APR?
It was 38.5. It was ridiculous.
Plus, they want the repayment over, what, 9 months?
Absolutely. And the thing I'll tell you, Bob,
cash flow. It kills your cash flow.
Bob, I owned a couple of retail businesses in my earlier days when I had dark-colored hair. And I will tell you that I understand why small businesses do that, and quite often banks don't. We're coming into the Christmas season. I did 40% of my annual sales between November 25th and December 31st. So having that money to get that inventory when I needed it, you know, I could take that money and double it. So paying 25, 30, 40% interest, it's horrible, but it made sense. That's why I had this conversation with our lenders the other day, Bob. I think every small business request, you have to look at the possibility of adding an express revolver as a second piece to that loan request to keep them from going to somebody like Cabbage or other alternative lenders.
Once they go down that route, it can be the death of the business because we all do our cash flow analysis, and in the case study that you cited, $50,000, that's a $50,000 hit in cash flow, and not too many businesses can.
Well, and one thing I recommend to our bankers, Bob, is when you get that updated financial statement, you see a new debt to an alternative lender on there, you need to immediately take a look at that and see if it's something that you can redo and amortize on a normal term for that business. Because it's not about today, it's about what condition they're going to be in a year from now and 2 years from now.
6 and 9 months. And we're beating this to death, but I think it's such an important topic. Also, when you are out there in your local community and you see the sign, hey, we can't take credit cards today, or the restaurant says, our internet's down, where's my iPhone? I could take a credit card on the iPhone. What they're doing is they're circumventing that alternative lender, and that's a huge red flag. So,
hey, Bob, I'll share a story, Bob. When I bought my small business, I bought it from my dad. And the way I repaid my debt to my dad is through credit card transactions. He still had that going to his account. And you'd see me on a Friday afternoon when cash was tight and somebody would be buying a large screen television. I'm like, you know, I can cut the price 15% more for cash.
Cash is king. I love that. He was the first alternative lender. What percentage of your SBA requests include refinancing? Same institution debt. I love this question, Lance. I think we do not do this enough as lenders.
Well, this question is intended to encourage you to look at small businesses that you've done financing in your bank, and maybe you have it on a shorter term than SBA would allow, but there are a lot of good loan opportunities that you have in your bank, good SBA loan opportunities. So always be looking for that next SBA loan opportunity, and some of it is refinancing debt that you already have on the books.
You cannot do a PLP, but you can certainly do it. It is allowed. What is the most common reason for substantiating refinancing as a use of proceeds for an SBA loan? I like that question.
Well, and it's just to get a take. These are all reasons, but I was just curious what our bankers thought was the most common reason. The most common reason that I see, Bob, is a shorter than justified maturity.
And the answers are?
Hey, Bob, what does that say about me? My reason is 0%.
We're going to move on to the next question. No. They're all appropriate, and there is no right or wrong answer. Do you establish escrow accounts? How common is this, Lance?
Bob, not real common, but it's something I encourage especially on SBA loans that have commercial real estate as collateral. Part of the reason for that, Bob, is I've worked on 2 or 3 circumstances in the last couple of years where we had to do another loan just so they could cover their taxes and insurance at the end of the year.
Good point. And the SOP allows you to do that, correct?
Absolutely. 5 years ago, escrowing was not allowed, but it is allowed. The 5010-5H does allow you to establish. Now, there's some rules you have to follow, but it does allow you to establish an escrow account. The rules are not complicated. They're pretty simple.
Yeah, I mean, basically what you do conventionally, you can do with SBA.
Well, and if you have, back in the day when you didn't do a lot of $2, $3, $4, $5 million SBA deals, but if you've got a $4 million SBA deal in commercial real estate, their property tax might be $150,000, and they're rolling into October, which is when it's typically paid, or at least here in Arkansas, and they don't have the money for it. So it's a lot easier for them to escrow it throughout the year and just have that money there ready and available to make sure taxes and insurance are paid.
And you're being a proactive lender and you're solving a problem. Do you consider adding a working capital revolving line of credit using SBA Express with your larger 7(a) requests? We covered that.
Yeah, unfortunately we did already cover that, but it's something that I really encourage all banks, participant lenders to consider. When you've got a larger request, what's it going to hurt to throw in an express revolving line of credit? In some cases, they never use it, but it certainly, in my opinion, helps make sure that the larger request gets repaid.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. If you do not do that, and you're talking about your $4 million a year loan, and express 10%, say a $350,000 loan, which is certainly at prime plus 2 3/4, prime plus 4, where we can go these days. If your borrower is not prudent, and they go to the Cabbages, and they can get a $250,000, $300,000 loan from Cabbage at 40%, do the math. Yeah, all that's gonna do is extend the doomsday date out, and you could solve the problem and possibly save the business. But once they go down that loan with Cabbage at 40, 50%, you're going to be looking at a liquidation 18 to 24 months out.
Bob, this particularly becomes important with seasonal businesses, and so often in loan committee, I'll be setting and we'll be reviewing one, and they, either they didn't establish a line of credit for the business and did a larger SBA request, or maybe they did establish one and it wasn't big enough. You really need to look at the seasonality and the money needs. Looked at a business the other day that 3 months out of the year represented 80% of their sales, and there was a tiny line of credit done, and what happens is you're going to be revisiting it 12 to 18 months down the road when they have negative cash in their account.
And if you don't give them enough money, they're not. If you give them more, they can make more. Lending is difficult. We all understand that. It's got to be. It's a science.
It's easier to provide an adequate line of credit, cross-collateralize it with the commercial real estate at the beginning, than to wake up 2 years down the road and realize they need the money.
Or they went to and today they're going to online lenders. And why is the cash flow draining from the business? What did we talk about week 7?
We talked about some really important topics, use of proceeds, how to document that. That becomes so critically important, especially on early default loans, working capital. It's always important to analyze the working capital needs of a small business when they're borrowing money from you. Refinancing and how to use that with the SBA program. We did talk about those rules related to the escrow accounts, and again, it's something on those larger CRE deals that I recommend considering. And we talked about some of the requirements on an SBA loan used for construction.
Email question. Should the DBA be made a part of the borrower name? I like the question. SBA Form 147 or 148 instructs us specifically state not to use the DBA name in the blank for borrower name. However, commitments, loan approvals, etc. state the borrower should be with the DBA. What's the story on this, Lance?
In my practice, the person who sent the question in, they put in, I guess that's Smythe with the E, or is it? Enterprises LLC, DBA Taco Tuesday. That's how I'd list it. They don't want the DBA. If the borrower's an LLC or a S Corp or C Corp, they want that name in the borrower and the guarantor name. It's okay to list the DBA afterwards, and that would be a practice that we follow in our lending.
I agree. End of the course. What do you finish up with?
Well, we finish up with what I think is some great information how to set up the loan file. I share with you what I think is a best practice for setting up your loan file. We talk about file review. File review is so important in the SBA lending process, looking at the file at specific times in the life of the SBA loan and taking care of exceptions that might exist. We talk a little about the SBA lender review, although that continues to evolve. I had an extended conversation with somebody in headquarters, Bob, about the PAIRS review. My one gripe about the PAIRS review is SBA updates it, but you know how information lags with SBA, so you can make something that should make a positive impact on your PAIRS score, and it takes 3 months for it to do that. So I've been explaining to the guys in headquarters, if we do things that are right according to the SOP, and we take proactive steps, we should be rewarded in our PAIRS score immediately, not 3 months down the road. But again, we'll talk about the lender review, and we also talk about the early default loan, which handling an early default loan requires that the closer do things properly. And I got to be honest with you, SBA loan closers are so important in the SBA lending process. Having spent a lot of my career working liquidation projects on SBA loans, if the SBA loan closer does their job well, the liquidator's job will be easy.
Oh, absolutely. Joseph, talk to me. When will the final be posted? The final's already up. Okay. For those of you online, once you take the final, take as many times as you want. We're asking for 90% pass rate. There's no trick questions. There should not be any trick questions on that.
No. The only trick questions, Bob, are the ones that I got dyslexic when I sent in the key.
Yeah, the trick is when we don't know what we're doing. And do me a favor, send me your physical address where you want this shipped. We will get it out to you. So if you would just send an email to Joseph, say, hey, I finished the course, or Lance, I finished the course, send my plaque, and we'll get it out to you. Well deserved, and we will do that. And with that, Lance, do we have any other questions, Joseph? Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a great weekend.